My name is Stephanie Collins, I'm 34 years old, and I thought my son's 8th birthday party would be a day of pure joy. Instead, it became the day I discovered who my real family truly was. As I hung the last balloon in our living room, my phone rang with that familiar demanding tone. "Stephanie, we need to talk about Ben's party," my mother's voice cut through the cheerful atmosphere like a knife. "Your father and I have discussed it, and we think Ben needs to learn to share his birthday gifts with his cousins. It's only fair." My hands trembled as I gripped the phone tighter. "Mom, it's his birthday. His gifts are his to enjoy." The silence that followed felt suffocating before she delivered her ultimatum that would change everything. Before we dive into this story that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about family loyalty, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Now, let me tell you about the birthday party that exposed the shocking truth about the people I trusted most. The doorbell rang exactly at 2 o'clock, and I knew my day was about to spiral out of control. Through the peephole, I could see my parents Harold and Dolores standing with my sister Jennifer and her 3 children, all wearing expressions that told me this wasn't going to be the celebration I had planned. Harold, at 67, still carried himself with the same authoritative posture that had intimidated me throughout childhood, while Dolores clutched her oversized purse like it contained weapons for battle. Jennifer, 2 years older than me and perpetually bitter about what she perceived as my privileges, stood behind them with her arms crossed, already prepared for confrontation. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Dolores said to Ben as they entered, but her eyes were scanning the room for the birthday gifts I had carefully arranged on the side table. The bright red bicycle with its gleaming chrome handlebars sat prominently among the other presents, representing 3 months of overtime shifts and sacrificed dinners out. Ben, sweet and unsuspecting at 8 years old, hugged his grandparents enthusiastically, completely unaware of the storm brewing around his special day. "Mom, Dad, I'm glad you could make it," I said cautiously, watching as Harold's gaze fixed on the bicycle with calculating intensity. Jennifer's children, ages 6, 9, and 11, immediately gravitated toward Ben's gifts like moths to flame, their grabby hands already reaching for packages that weren't theirs to touch. "Now remember what we discussed on the phone," Harold said in his booming voice that brooked no argument. "Ben needs to understand that sharing is caring, especially with family." Before I could respond, Dolores had already begun her manipulation campaign. "You know, children, your grandmother thinks it would be wonderful if you could all enjoy these lovely gifts together," she told Jennifer's kids while shooting me a warning glance. "After all, we're all family here, and family shares everything." The way she emphasized the word everything sent chills down my spine because I recognized the tone she used when she was about to steamroll over any opposition. Jennifer immediately joined the assault on my parenting. "Honestly, Stephanie, you've always been too possessive. It won't hurt Ben to let his cousins play with his things. You're raising him to be selfish." Her voice carried that same condescending tone she had perfected during our teenage years, when she would convince our parents that my successes were somehow unfair advantages. The irony wasn't lost on me that Jennifer, who had never let her own children share so much as a French fry, was now lecturing me about generosity. The situation escalated quickly when Harold crouched down to Ben's eye level and began his psychological warfare. "You want to be a good boy, don't you, Ben? Good boys share their toys with their family. You wouldn't want your grandpa to think you're greedy, would you?" Ben's little face crumpled with confusion as he looked between his grandfather and the bicycle he had been dreaming about for months. The sight of my son's distress ignited something fierce inside me. "Dad, stop it," I said firmly, stepping between Harold and Ben. "This is Ben's birthday party, and these are his gifts. He doesn't owe anyone anything." The room fell silent except for the sound of Jennifer's children continuing to paw through presents that didn't belong to them. Harold's face darkened with the kind of anger I remembered from childhood, the kind that meant someone was about to pay a price for defying him. "You're spoiling that boy rotten, Stephanie," Dolores chimed in, her voice dripping with false concern. "No wonder he's having trouble making friends at school." Children don't like selfish playmates. The accusation hit me like a physical blow because Ben had mentioned feeling lonely lately, and now my own mother was weaponizing my child's vulnerabilities against me. Jennifer's eldest son, Tyler, had managed to climb onto Ben's new bicycle and was riding it in circles around our living room while Ben watched in helpless dismay. "Look, Grandma, I'm sharing," Tyler announced triumphantly, as if commandeering someone else's birthday gift was an act of virtue. When Ben started to cry, Jennifer had the audacity to roll her eyes. "See what I mean about spoiled? He can't even handle a little sharing." The breaking point came when Harold declared that if I continued to be unreasonable, they would leave the party and reconsider their relationship with Ben altogether. It would be a shame for Ben to lose his family because his mother taught him to be selfish, he said with calculated cruelty. The threat was clear. Comply with their demands or face exile from the family I had spent my entire life trying to please. As I watched my son's confusion turn to tears, I realized this battle was just beginning. Just as I was gathering courage to stand my ground against my family's emotional manipulation, the doorbell rang again, and my heart stopped. Through the window, I could see Michael Thompson, my ex-husband, standing on my porch with a massive gift bag and that charming smile that had once fooled me into believing he was capable of genuine love. The same smile that had hidden years of emotional abuse and manipulation that had nearly destroyed my sense of self-worth. "Surprise!" Michael announced as I reluctantly opened the door, his voice carrying across the room to where my parents and sister watched with expressions of satisfaction rather than shock. "I hope you don't mind me crashing the party, but when Harold called and told me how much Ben missed having his dad around, I just couldn't stay away." The pieces of their conspiracy clicked into place with devastating clarity as I realized my own father had orchestrated this ambush. Harold stepped forward with theatrical enthusiasm, embracing Michael like a long-lost son while shooting me a triumphant glare. "Michael, so good to see you. We were just discussing how important family is, weren't we, Stephanie?" The emphasis on family was deliberate and cutting, designed to make me feel like the outsider in my own home. Dolores practically glowed with vindictive pleasure as she watched my carefully planned day crumble around me. "I brought something special for my boy," Michael announced, pulling out an expensive remote control helicopter that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The gift was calculated to overshadow everything I had worked so hard to provide, a classic Michael move designed to make me look inadequate by comparison. Ben's eyes widened with excitement, and I felt my heart break a little more as I watched my son being manipulated by his father's false generosity. "Isn't that wonderful?" Jennifer gushed, suddenly animated in a way she never was around my modest presence. "Ben is so lucky to have a father who cares enough to buy him such amazing gifts." The implied criticism of my own gift-giving abilities stung, especially since Michael had contributed exactly $0 to Ben's upkeep since our divorce 2 years ago. Michael then launched into his carefully rehearsed speech about wanting to be more involved in Ben's life, painting himself as the reformed father who had learned from his mistakes. "I know I haven't been perfect, but I love my son, and I want to make up for lost time," he said with practiced sincerity that made my stomach turn. Several of the party guests, friends of my parents who didn't know our history, began nodding approvingly at his performance. Finally, someone with sense, Harold declared loudly enough for everyone to hear. "A boy needs his father, and it's about time you stopped being so stubborn about this, Stephanie." The accusation that I was keeping father and son apart was particularly galling since Michael had voluntarily abandoned his parental responsibilities the moment our marriage ended, leaving me to handle everything alone while he pursued his freedom. The manipulation reached new heights when Michael knelt beside Ben and delivered his masterstroke. "I've missed you so much, buddy. Your grandpa told me that your mom has been having a hard time, and I want you to know that Daddy is here now to help take care of you." The way he positioned himself as Ben's rescuer while simultaneously undermining my competence was textbook gaslighting, and I could see it working on several of the adults present who didn't understand the full context. Mrs. Patterson, one of my mother's bridge club friends, actually had the nerve to pat Michael's shoulder sympathetically. It takes a big man to admit his mistakes and fight for his family, she said with approval that felt like acid in my veins. The way she looked at me afterward, with disappointed judgment, made it clear that I was being cast as the villain in their narrative. Michael has been telling us how much he wants to be involved in Ben's life, Dolores announced to the room with false innocence. He's even talking about seeking more formal custody arrangements so Ben can have the stability of both parents. The threat was subtle but unmistakable, designed to terrorize me into compliance while maintaining the facade of concern for my son's welfare. Jennifer seized the moment to deliver her own calculated blow. Maybe this is exactly what Ben needs. A father figure to provide some balance. Stephanie has always been so intense about everything. The casual dismissal of my parenting abilities in favor of a man who had shown no interest in his son until today felt like betrayal of the deepest kind. As I stood in my own living room, surrounded by people who were supposed to love and support me, I felt more alone than ever before. Michael's presence had transformed my parents from mere manipulators into active conspirators, and I could see Ben beginning to believe their version of reality where I was the problem that needed fixing. The sound of children laughing and playing around me felt surreal, like I was trapped in some twisted alternate version of my son's birthday party. The situation deteriorated further when Janet Miller, my next-door neighbor who had always harbored an obvious crush on Michael, appeared at my door with a casserole dish and a knowing smile. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by, but I heard Michael was here and wanted to say hello," she said with fake sweetness that didn't fool anyone except perhaps herself. Janet had been divorced for 5 years and had made numerous transparent attempts to insert herself into Michael's life during our marriage, behavior that had intensified dramatically since our divorce. "Janet. What a lovely surprise," Michael responded with the kind of warm enthusiasm he had never shown for my friends or family members. The familiar pang of jealousy mixed with disgust as I watched him turn on his charm for yet another woman who was naive enough to fall for his manipulative charisma. Janet practically preened under his attention while shooting me subtle looks of victory, as if she had won some contest I hadn't realized we were playing. "You know, I've been so worried about little Ben," Janet announced to the room with theatrical concern that made my teeth clench. "It's been really hard watching him grow up without his father around. Children need both parents, don't they?" The pointed look she directed at me was filled with judgment and superiority, as if my divorce had been a selfish choice rather than an act of survival. Harold immediately latched onto Janet's comments as validation for his position. Finally, someone with sense. Janet understands what's best for children, unlike some people who put their own pride before their family's welfare. The accusation stung because he knew how desperately I had tried to make my marriage work, how many times I had forgiven Michael's emotional cruelty in the name of keeping our family together. "I don't think Stephanie realizes how much Ben talks about missing his daddy," Janet continued with false sympathy that made my blood boil. "Just last week, he was in my backyard asking if I thought his father would ever come home. It just broke my heart." The fabrication was so obvious that I actually gasped, but Janet delivered it with such conviction that several people in the room began looking at me with disappointed disapproval. Michael seized the moment to present his doctored evidence with devastating effectiveness. "Actually, I have something that might help everyone understand the situation better," he said, pulling out his phone with practiced reluctance. "These are text messages from Stephanie, threatening to keep Ben away from me if I didn't pay extra money beyond child support." The messages he showed contained my words but stripped of context, making my attempts to ensure financial responsibility look like extortion. "That's not what those messages mean," I protested desperately, but my voice was lost in the murmur of shocked disapproval from the gathered guests. Jennifer shook her head with theatrical disappointment while Harold's face darkened with anger that seemed genuine enough to convince everyone present that I was the manipulative one in this scenario. "I just want to be a good father to my son," Michael continued with perfectly calibrated vulnerability. "But every time I try to be involved, Stephanie creates obstacles. She's turned something as simple as a birthday party into a battleground because she can't bear to see Ben happy with both his parents." The way he positioned my attempt to protect my child as selfish possessiveness was masterful in its cruelty. Janet moved closer to Michael with obvious intent to comfort him, placing her hand on his arm in a gesture that was meant to appear supportive but came across as predatory. "You're such a good man for keeping trying despite all the difficulties," she cooed with admiration that made me want to vomit. "Ben is lucky to have a father who fights for him like this." The alliance between Harold, Dolores, Jennifer, Michael, and Janet created an overwhelming force against my attempts to maintain control over the narrative. They had effectively painted me as the unreasonable obstacle to Ben's happiness, the bitter ex-wife who couldn't move past her personal grievances for the sake of her child's welfare. Their coordinated attack was so well executed that I began to doubt my own memories of why I had left Michael in the first place. "Maybe we should all sit down and have an honest conversation about what's best for Ben," Dolores suggested with false reasonableness that concealed her true agenda. "This poor child shouldn't have to suffer because the adults in his life can't get along." The way she framed the conflict made me appear equally responsible for the dysfunction, ignoring completely that I was the one being ambushed in my own home. Lisa Rodriguez, my closest friend for over 10 years and someone I had trusted with my deepest secrets about my marriage, chose that moment to deliver the most devastating betrayal of all. "You know what, maybe they have a point," she said quietly, refusing to meet my eyes as she spoke. "I've watched you struggle as a single mom, and maybe Ben really would benefit from having his father more involved in his life." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow because Lisa had been there through every nightmare of my marriage, had held me while I cried over Michael's emotional abuse, had encouraged me to leave for Ben's sake as much as my own. To hear her now suggesting that I should welcome my abuser back into our lives felt like watching my closest ally switch sides in the middle of battle. "Lisa knew how much I missed my family," Michael said with grateful appreciation that made me want to scream. "She's been helping me understand how to approach this situation in a way that would be best for everyone involved." The revelation that my best friend had been secretly communicating with my ex-husband behind my back completed my isolation and left me feeling utterly betrayed by everyone I had trusted. As I stood surrounded by their united front, watching Ben play with his expensive new helicopter while his cousins demanded turns, I realized that this had never been about sharing toys or birthday parties. This was a carefully orchestrated campaign to undermine my authority as Ben's mother and potentially gain custody of my son. The shock of understanding their true agenda left me reeling and desperate for a way to fight back against forces that seemed insurmountable. The coordinated assault on my parenting and character reached its crescendo when Harold delivered his first major ultimatum with the cold calculation of a business negotiation. "Stephanie, your mother and I have been discussing this situation extensively, and we've reached a decision," he announced with the authority he had wielded over our family for decades. "If you continue to obstruct Michael's relationship with Ben and refuse to teach our grandson proper values about sharing and family cooperation, we will have no choice but to sever our relationship with both of you." The threat hung in the air like poisonous gas, suffocating any remaining hope I had for a peaceful resolution. Dolores nodded solemnly beside him, her expression crafted to suggest that this decision caused her great pain while simultaneously conveying her unwavering support for Harold's position. "It breaks my heart to even consider such a thing," she said with dramatic sadness that didn't reach her calculating eyes, "but we cannot stand by and watch you damage our grandson's emotional development." Jennifer escalated the psychological warfare with surgical precision, delivering a blow that she knew would terrorize me more than any other threat they could devise. "You know, Stephanie, I've been talking to some people at Child Protective Services through my volunteer work," she said with casual menace that made my blood freeze. "They're very interested in cases where children are being emotionally manipulated by bitter parents who use them as weapons against their ex-spouses." The implication was crystal clear: comply with their demands or face the nightmare of having my fitness as a mother officially questioned by government authorities. The threat was particularly cruel because Jennifer knew about my deepest fear of losing Ben, a terror that had haunted me since the divorce when Michael had briefly threatened to seek full custody before losing interest in the legal battle. Now, let's not get carried away," Michael interjected with false reasonableness, playing his role as the moderate voice of sanity while his allies delivered the heavy threats. "I just want what's best for Ben. I think we can all agree that a stable, two-parent household would be ideal for his development. The casual suggestion that our current living situation was inherently unstable hit its mark, making several guests nod in unconscious agreement with his assessment. The social pressure intensified as more party guests began to distance themselves from what they perceived as family drama. Mrs. Chen, Ben's teacher whom I had specifically invited to show off my son's academic achievements, gathered her purse and made polite excuses about needing to leave early. "I hope you can work things out," she said with the kind of diplomatic neutrality that made it clear she didn't want to be associated with whatever dysfunction she was witnessing. One by one, the other parents began following Mrs. Chen's example, collecting their children and offering vague apologies about forgotten appointments or family obligations. The exodus of witnesses to my humiliation felt like abandonment by my community, leaving me increasingly isolated with only the people who were actively working to destroy my authority remaining in my home. Lisa's betrayal reached new depths when she revealed the full extent of her treachery with devastating effectiveness. "Michael reached out to me a few months ago because he was concerned about Ben's emotional state," she explained to the room with the kind of concerned reasonableness that made her deception sound like caring friendship. "He asked me to keep an eye on things and let him know if I thought Ben was suffering from the divorce." "Suffering how exactly?" I managed to ask through the shock of learning that my closest friend had been spying on me for weeks, reporting my private struggles to my abusive ex-husband like some kind of emotional intelligence operative. "Well, Ben has seemed withdrawn lately," Lisa continued with clinical detachment that erased years of friendship in favor of her new allegiance. "And you've been so stressed about money and work that maybe you haven't noticed how much he needs his father's presence in his life." The accusation that I was too self-absorbed to recognize my own son's emotional needs felt like being stabbed in the heart by someone I had trusted completely. Michael played his part perfectly, stepping forward to place a comforting hand on Ben's shoulder with paternal authority that hadn't existed during the years when he actually lived with us. "Son, I want you to know that no matter what happens between your mother and me, I love you and I want to be part of your life," he said with practiced sincerity that made me want to vomit. "Would you like that? Would you like Daddy to be around more often?" Ben, overwhelmed by the adult conversation swirling around him and desperate for approval from all the authority figures in his life, nodded with innocent enthusiasm that broke my heart. "Yes, Daddy, I want you to come back," he said with 8-year-old simplicity that didn't understand the implications of his words. The victory on Michael's face was subtle but unmistakable as he hugged our son while making eye contact with me over Ben's head. "You see?" Harold proclaimed with satisfaction that bordered on smugness. "Even Ben knows what's best for this family. Sometimes children are wiser than their parents." The way he framed my son's natural desire to please adults as evidence against my parenting decisions felt like the final nail in the coffin of my authority. Janet seized the moment to deliver what she clearly hoped would be the killing blow to my resistance. "You know, Michael, if you ever need a character witness for any legal proceedings, I would be happy to testify about what a devoted father you are and how much Ben misses you," she offered with transparent agenda that made her motivations obvious to everyone except apparently the people who mattered. As I stood in my own living room, watching my son being manipulated by people who claimed to love him while simultaneously destroying the stable home I had worked so hard to create, I felt completely defeated. The coordinated nature of their assault, the way they had isolated me from my support system and turned my own child against me, seemed impossible to overcome. For the first time since leaving Michael, I wondered if I was actually wrong about everything, if maybe I really was the selfish, bitter woman they were painting me as. The sound of Ben laughing as he played with his father's expensive gift while my own carefully chosen present sat forgotten on the table felt like the soundtrack to my complete failure as a parent. The birthday party I had planned with such love and hope had become the stage for my public humiliation and the potential destruction of everything I held dear. Just as I felt myself drowning in the overwhelming tide of manipulation and betrayal, the front door opened to reveal Grace Williams, a woman whose presence immediately shifted the energy in the room like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Grace was the mother of Ben's best friend Tommy, but more importantly, she was a family law attorney with 20 years of experience recognizing manipulation tactics and parental alienation strategies. I'm so sorry I'm late, Grace said warmly as she entered with Tommy in tow, carrying a beautifully wrapped gift and completely oblivious to the psychological warfare that had been taking place in her absence. We had a soccer emergency that required immediate ice cream intervention. Her easy laugh and genuine affection for Ben created a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere that had dominated the party until her arrival. Grace's trained legal mind immediately picked up on the undercurrents of tension as she surveyed the room, noting the uncomfortable body language of the remaining guests and the tear stains on Ben's cheeks that adults had been too focused on their own agendas to properly address. Is everything okay here? She asked with the kind of direct concern that made it clear she wasn't going to accept polite deflections or social niceties in place of honest answers. Just family discussions, Michael responded smoothly, turning on his charm for this new audience member who might need to be won over to their cause. We've been talking about how to best support Ben's emotional development and ensure he has access to both his parents. The reasonable tone concealed the aggressive campaign he had been waging against my parental authority, but Grace's experience with manipulative personalities helped her recognize the performance for what it was. Family discussions that made Ben cry on his birthday? Grace observed with the sharp attention to detail that made her excellent at her job. That seems like interesting timing for such important conversations. Her direct challenge to their narrative caused several of the conspirators to shift uncomfortably, particularly Janet, who clearly hadn't expected to encounter anyone capable of seeing through their carefully constructed facade. Harold attempted to regain control of the situation by deploying his usual intimidation tactics against this new threat to their plans. I don't believe we've been introduced. I'm Ben's grandfather, and we're dealing with some internal family matters that don't really concern outside parties, he said with dismissive authority that had cowed opposition for decades. Actually, as someone who cares about Ben's welfare and has professional experience with family dynamics, I'd say this concerns me quite a bit, Grace replied calmly, refusing to be intimidated by Harold's bluster. Especially when I see a child being upset during what should be a celebration of his life. Her willingness to challenge Harold's authority created a crack in their unified front that gave me my first glimmer of hope. Grace's next move was devastating in its simplicity and effectiveness. Michael, isn't it? I'm curious about something. If you're so concerned about being involved in Ben's life, could you tell me when his last dentist appointment was? Or what grade he's currently struggling with in school? The questions were delivered with professional courtesy, but their impact was immediate and brutal because they exposed the gap between Michael's proclaimed devotion and his actual knowledge of our son's daily life. Michael's confidence faltered visibly as he realized he couldn't answer basic questions about Ben's routine medical care or academic progress, details that any truly involved parent would know instinctively. Well, I've been getting back up to speed since Stephanie has been restrictive about information sharing, he deflected desperately, but Grace's raised eyebrow indicated that she wasn't buying his explanation. Restrictive how? Grace pressed with legal precision that made everyone in the room realize they were dealing with someone who understood the difference between legitimate parental concerns and manipulative tactics. Are you current on child support payments? Do you have a regular visitation schedule that you've been following? Because in my experience, involved parents don't need special occasions to maintain relationships with their children. The questions hit their marks with devastating accuracy, exposing Michael's claims of devoted fatherhood as the fiction they had always been. Harold and Dolores exchanged worried glances as they realized their carefully planned ambush was being dismantled by someone with the professional expertise to recognize their manipulation tactics. Grace turned her attention to me with genuine compassion that felt like a lifeline in the ocean of hostility I had been drowning in. Stephanie, would you like to have a private conversation about what's been happening here? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're being ganged up on in your own home during your son's birthday party. The validation of my experience felt like oxygen to someone who had been suffocating under gaslighting and manipulation. That won't be necessary, Jennifer interjected quickly, clearly recognizing the threat Grace represented to their campaign. This is just a family disagreement about parenting styles. Nothing that requires outside intervention. The desperation in her voice was poorly concealed, and Grace's expression indicated that she had heard similar deflections from abusive family systems many times before. "Actually, I think it might be exactly what's needed here," Grace replied with professional authority that brooked no argument. "Because what I'm observing doesn't look like healthy family communication. It looks like a coordinated effort to undermine a mother's authority in front of her child, which is actually a form of psychological abuse that family courts take very seriously." The room fell silent as Grace's words landed like bombs, exploding the comfortable narrative that had allowed my family to justify their behavior as concern rather than abuse. For the first time since the party began, I felt like someone was seeing the situation clearly and was willing to speak truth to the people who had been using their claimed love for Ben to terrorize me into submission. Grace pulled out her phone with deliberate intention that made several of the conspirators visibly nervous. "You know what? I think this conversation is important enough to document. Would anyone mind if I recorded the rest of this discussion? Just to make sure we all remember what was said and agreed upon regarding Ben's welfare." The suggestion sent panic through their ranks because it would preserve evidence of their manipulation tactics for potential future legal proceedings. Michael's facade cracked completely under Grace's professional scrutiny, revealing the calculating predator that had always lurked beneath his charming surface. "Now wait just a minute. This is getting way out of hand. We don't need lawyers involved in a simple family discussion," he protested with barely concealed anger that proved Grace had identified the real threat he represented. "Then maybe you should have kept it a simple family discussion instead of turning it into an intervention designed to publicly humiliate the mother of your child," Grace responded with ice-cold precision that left no room for denial or deflection. "Because that's what this looks like to someone trained to recognize parental alienation tactics and emotional abuse patterns." For the first time in hours, I felt strong enough to speak up for myself and my son. Grace is right. This isn't about sharing toys or family cooperation. This is about controlling me and undermining my relationship with Ben, I said with newfound clarity that cut through the fog of manipulation that had been clouding my judgment. The look of panic on my parents' faces told me that Grace's presence had fundamentally shifted the balance of power in the room. The dynamic shift in the room became even more pronounced when Detective Ryan Walsh, my friend from college and someone whose professional experience with family crisis situations had given him a keen eye for detecting abuse patterns, arrived for the party just as tensions were reaching their peak. Ryan's imposing presence and his immediate assessment of the hostile atmosphere provided exactly the backup support that Grace and I needed to turn the tables on our adversaries. "Sorry I'm late, Stephanie," Ryan said as he surveyed the room with the trained observation skills of someone who had spent 15 years responding to domestic disturbances and family crisis calls. "Traffic was murder, but I brought Ben that baseball glove we talked about." His casual mention of our previous conversations about Ben's interests stood in stark contrast to Michael's earlier inability to answer basic questions about our son's life. "Ryan, perfect timing," Grace said with professional recognition that indicated she knew exactly what kind of ally had just walked through my door. "We were just discussing some concerns about family dynamics and what's in Ben's best interest. Your perspective might be valuable here." The way she phrased the introduction made it clear that she was bringing Ryan into the conversation as a witness and potential expert rather than just another party guest. Michael's discomfort became palpable as he recognized the shift in power dynamics that Ryan's arrival represented. "I don't think we need to involve law enforcement in a private family matter," he said with nervous aggression that revealed his awareness that his behavior might not hold up under professional scrutiny. The irony of Michael objecting to police presence when he had spent the afternoon trying to paint me as an unfit mother wasn't lost on anyone with functioning brain cells. "Actually, Detective Walsh isn't here in any official capacity," I clarified with growing confidence that felt like reclaiming my own voice. "But since we're apparently having conversations about what's best for Ben's welfare, I think it's appropriate to have input from people who actually know our daily reality rather than just showing up today with expensive gifts and demands for compliance." Ryan's professional instincts kicked in as he observed the group dynamics and body language that told a story of intimidation and manipulation. "Has someone been threatening you or Ben?" he asked with direct concern that made Harold and Dolores exchange nervous glances. Because from what I can see, this doesn't look like a typical birthday party atmosphere. Detective Walsh, we appreciate your concern, but this is really just a family disagreement about parenting approaches, Janet interjected quickly, clearly recognizing the danger that police involvement could represent for their carefully orchestrated campaign. Nothing that requires any kind of official intervention or investigation. Parenting approaches that involve threatening to cut off contact with a grandchild unless the mother complies with demands about how to raise him? Ryan asked with the kind of pointed directness that made everyone realize they were dealing with someone who understood the difference between healthy family boundaries and emotional manipulation tactics. Grace seized the moment to reveal the evidence she had been quietly gathering during her time in the room. Actually, Ryan, I've been taking notes about some concerning statements that have been made here today, she said while consulting her phone with professional thoroughness. Including threats about custody modification, accusations about unfit parenting, and what appears to be a coordinated effort to undermine Stephanie's authority as Ben's primary caregiver. Now wait just a minute, Harold blustered with indignation that couldn't quite conceal his growing panic about the direction this conversation was taking. We're Ben's grandparents, and we have every right to express concerns about how our grandson is being raised. That's not manipulation, that's family responsibility. Expressing concerns is one thing, Ryan replied with professional calm that made his words even more impactful. Organizing ambushes, making threats, and using children as emotional weapons is something else entirely. I've seen this pattern in domestic abuse situations more times than I can count. The clinical assessment hit like a sledgehammer, labeling their behavior with the accuracy that only comes from professional experience. Michael's desperation became obvious as he realized that his carefully planned campaign was unraveling under professional scrutiny. This is ridiculous. I'm just trying to be a better father to my son. Why is everyone acting like that's some kind of crime? The victim pose that had worked so effectively earlier in the day fell flat when delivered to people trained to recognize manipulation tactics. Being a better father would involve actually supporting your child financially and emotionally on a consistent basis, Grace observed with legal precision that cut through his deflections like a scalpel. Not showing up once every few months with expensive gifts and demands for special treatment. Her willingness to call out his fraudulent claims of devotion created visible cracks in the facade he had been maintaining. Ryan's next revelation sent shockwaves through the room that completely shifted the balance of power in my favor. You know, Michael, your name actually came up in our system recently in connection with a domestic disturbance call at your current address, he said with professional neutrality that made the information even more damaging. Something about threatening behavior toward a girlfriend. Want to explain how someone with anger management issues thinks he should have more access to a vulnerable child? The bombshell revelation that Michael's pattern of abusive behavior had continued after our divorce, involving other women and potentially escalating to the point of police intervention, destroyed any remaining credibility he might have had with the assembled witnesses. Harold and Dolores looked genuinely shocked, as if they were seeing Michael clearly for the first time instead of through the filter of their desire to control the situation. That's completely taken out of context, Michael protested desperately, but his defensive response only reinforced the accuracy of Ryan's information. It was just a misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion by someone who was trying to cause trouble. The classic abuser's deflection of responsibility onto his victims fell flat with an audience that included professionals trained to recognize such patterns. Grace delivered the final blow to their coordinated assault with devastating effectiveness. Stephanie, I think you should know that everything we've witnessed here today could be documented as evidence of harassment and potential parental alienation if this situation escalates to family court, she said with legal authority that made everyone realize the consequences of their actions. Creating hostile environments for children and undermining custodial parents are serious matters that judges take very seriously. The transformation in the room was immediate and dramatic as the reality of potential legal consequences penetrated the fog of entitlement and manipulation that had driven their behavior. Janet was the first to crack under pressure, her earlier confidence evaporating like morning mist as she realized she had involved herself in something that could have serious ramifications for everyone involved. I think maybe I should go, Janet announced with nervous haste that revealed her recognition that her romantic fantasies about Michael weren't worth potential legal complications. This seems like something that should be worked out privately between family members. The speed of her retreat from the battlefield spoke volumes about her true commitment to the cause she had been championing just minutes earlier. Lisa's betrayal became even more painful when she attempted to distance herself from the conspiracy now that it was falling apart. I was only trying to help, she said with defensive pleading that couldn't undo the damage her treachery had caused. Michael made it sound like you were really struggling, and I thought maybe Ben would benefit from having more family support. The pathetic attempt to reframe her spying and betrayal as concern for my welfare felt like salt in an already gaping wound. For the first time since the party began, I felt powerful enough to take control of my own narrative and demand accountability from the people who had spent the afternoon trying to destroy my relationship with my son. I want all of you to leave, I said with authority that surprised even myself. This is my home, this is my son's birthday party, and I will not allow any of you to continue terrorizing us in the name of family love. The moment I issued my ultimatum, the carefully constructed alliance of my tormentors began to crumble like a house of cards in a windstorm. Michael's facade of reformed fatherhood completely disintegrated under the weight of Ryan's professional revelations and Grace's legal expertise, leaving him exposed as the manipulative fraud he had always been beneath his charming exterior. You can't just throw me out, Michael protested with desperation that revealed how much his sense of control depended on maintaining his false narrative. I'm Ben's father, and I have rights. The transformation from concerned parent to entitled aggressor happened so quickly that even his former supporters looked uncomfortable with the ugly reality of his true personality. Ryan's response was swift and professional, cutting through Michael's blustering with the authority of someone who had dealt with countless similar situations. Actually, this is Stephanie's home, and she has every right to determine who is welcome here. If you refuse to leave when asked, that becomes criminal trespassing, which I'd be happy to handle officially if necessary. The calm delivery of legal consequences made Michael's options crystal clear. Grace added her own professional weight to the situation with devastating clarity about the legal implications of his behavior. Michael, I should also mention that your financial obligations to Ben don't magically disappear because you show up with expensive gifts once in a while. In fact, your current child support arrearage is approaching felony levels according to state guidelines. The revelation that he was thousands of dollars behind in support payments destroyed any remaining credibility he might have had. Harold and Dolores found themselves in the uncomfortable position of defending someone whose true character had been thoroughly exposed by people with professional expertise in recognizing abusive patterns. Now wait just a minute, Harold attempted weakly, but his usual authoritative bluster fell flat in the face of documented evidence and professional assessment. Dad, you called a man with a history of domestic violence and invited him to ambush me at my son's birthday party, I said with newfound clarity that felt like breaking free from decades of intimidation. You conspired with my abusive ex-husband to undermine my parenting and potentially take my child away from me. How exactly do you think that demonstrates love for your grandson? The question hung in the air like a sword, forcing Harold to confront the reality that his desire to control our family had led him to ally himself with someone who represented a genuine threat to Ben's well-being. For the first time in my adult life, I saw uncertainty flicker across my father's face as he struggled to justify actions that looked increasingly indefensible. Dolores attempted to salvage their position with emotional manipulation, but her tears felt hollow after everything that had transpired. We only wanted what was best for Ben, she sobbed with dramatic flair that no longer had the power to make me question my own judgment. We thought maybe if his parents could work together, he would be happier. By threatening to abandon him if I didn't comply with your demands? I responded with steel in my voice that surprised everyone, including myself. By helping his father create a hostile environment designed to make him doubt his mother's love? That's your idea of what's best for a child? The question stripped away her pretense of concern, revealing the controlling agenda that had always driven her behavior. Jennifer's position became completely untenable as she realized that her threats about child protective services could actually backfire spectacularly given the evidence of her own participation in creating an abusive environment for Ben. "Maybe we all just need to calm down and think about this more carefully," she said with nervous retreat that indicated her recognition that she had overplayed her hand. "The time for thinking was before you all decided to turn my son's birthday into an intervention designed to destroy his sense of security," I replied with authority that felt like reclaiming my own power. "Ben has watched his mother be attacked, threatened, and humiliated by people who claim to love him. Do you think that's the kind of memory he should have of his 8th birthday?" Ben himself, who had been quietly observing the adult drama with 8-year-old confusion, finally spoke up with innocent clarity that cut through all the manipulation and posturing. "Mommy, why is everyone being mean to you? I don't want them to be mean to you on my birthday." His simple statement of loyalty and love provided more validation than all the professional support in the world. The sight of Ben choosing to comfort me instead of being swayed by expensive gifts and false promises seemed to break something inside Harold's rigid worldview. "Ben, sweetheart, we weren't trying to be mean to your mother," he said with defeated exhaustion that revealed how much energy it had taken to maintain his aggressive campaign. "Yes, you were, Grandpa," Ben replied with 8-year-old honesty that adults often try to avoid. "You made Mommy cry, and Daddy was saying mean things about her. That's not how family is supposed to act." The wisdom in his simple observation highlighted how much damage they had done to their own relationships with him through their behavior. Grace seized the moment to address the legal realities that everyone needed to understand moving forward. "I think it's important for everyone to realize that what happened here today could be documented as harassment and potential child endangerment if this pattern continues," she said with professional authority that made clear the stakes involved. "Courts take very seriously any attempts to manipulate children or create hostile environments for custodial parents." Michael's final desperate attempt to salvage his position only reinforced how completely he had been exposed. "This is all blown way out of proportion. I just wanted to see my son on his birthday." The pathetic plea couldn't erase the evidence of his coordinated campaign with my family to undermine my authority and potentially gain custody through manipulation rather than legitimate concern. "Then you should have been seeing him regularly all along instead of abandoning him for months and then showing up with demands and threats," Ryan observed with clinical accuracy that left no room for deflection. Involved fathers don't need special occasions to maintain relationships with their children. As the various conspirators began to file out of my home, their earlier confidence replaced by embarrassment and defeat, I felt a sense of liberation that I hadn't experienced since before my marriage. For the first time in years, I had successfully stood up to the people who had spent my entire adult life trying to control and manipulate me into compliance with their agendas. Ben's birthday party, which had begun as a nightmare of family manipulation and betrayal, was transforming into a genuine celebration as the toxic influences were finally expelled from our space. The sight of my son smiling again, playing with Tommy while Grace and Ryan provided the security of adult protection, felt like the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. Just when I thought the worst was over and we could finally salvage Ben's birthday celebration, Harold made one last desperate attempt to regain control of the situation by playing what he clearly believed was his ultimate trump card. 3 days later, I received a certified letter from Morrison and Associates, a prestigious law firm that specialized in family law and custody disputes, informing me that my parents were petitioning the court for grandparents' visitation rights. "They can't do this," I told Grace over the phone, my voice shaking as I read the legal document that transformed their earlier threats into official action. "They're actually trying to use the legal system to force their way back into Ben's life after everything they did at the party." The betrayal felt even deeper than their behavior at the birthday party because it represented a calculated escalation designed to terrorize me into submission. Grace's response was grimly professional as she reviewed the petition and recognized the aggressive legal strategy my parents had employed. "This is actually more common than you might think," she explained with the kind of calm expertise that helped steady my panic. "Controlling family members often escalate to legal action when their usual manipulation tactics fail. But the good news is that everything we witnessed at Ben's party actually strengthens your position significantly. The situation became even more complicated when Dolores began a social media campaign designed to garner sympathy and support for their cause, posting carefully crafted messages about grandparents' rights and how some parents use children as weapons to hurt family members. Her public relations strategy was sophisticated and effective, generating supportive comments from people who didn't understand the full context of our family dysfunction. "Look at this," I showed Ryan the Facebook posts that were spreading like wildfire through our community network, painting my parents as heartbroken grandparents being cruelly separated from their beloved grandson by their vindictive daughter. They're making themselves look like victims while completely ignoring their own behavior that led to this situation. The most devastating blow came when I discovered that Harold had been secretly recording our conversations during recent phone calls, carefully editing the recordings to remove context and make my attempts to set boundaries sound like unreasonable hostility toward family members who just wanted to love their grandson. The manipulated audio files were included as evidence in their legal petition, demonstrating a level of premeditation that shocked even Grace with its calculated cruelty. "This is actually illegal in our state," Ryan informed me after reviewing the documentation of Harold's secret recordings. "Recording private conversations without consent is a felony, and using edited recordings as evidence in family court proceedings could result in serious legal consequences for them." His professional assessment provided some comfort, but the violation of trust felt overwhelming. The pressure intensified when Jennifer joined the legal assault by filing her own affidavit supporting our parents' petition, claiming that she had witnessed me emotionally abusing Ben by isolating him from his extended family. Her willingness to commit perjury in family court by providing false testimony about my parenting demonstrated how far the family conspiracy was willing to go to maintain control. "They're trying to overwhelm me with legal bills and emotional stress," I explained to Grace as we prepared our response to multiple legal challenges. "Even if we win, the process itself is designed to punish me for refusing to comply with their demands. The financial burden of defending myself against multiple family members in court threatened to bankrupt me even if we ultimately prevailed." The situation reached its darkest point when Ben began experiencing nightmares and anxiety attacks, clearly traumatized by the ongoing adult conflict that centered around his relationship with various family members. "Mommy, are the police going to take me away because Grandpa says you're not a good mom?" he asked with 8-year-old terror that broke my heart into pieces. "Absolutely not, sweetheart," I assured him while internally raging against the adults who had weaponized his innocent love and trust for their own agenda. "The police and judges help protect children. They don't take them away from moms who love them and take good care of them." But even as I provided reassurance, I wondered if I could guarantee that outcome given the resources my family was willing to deploy against us. The breakthrough came when Grace discovered that Harold's secret recordings had captured far more than he realized, including conversations where he and Dolores discussed their strategy for gaining control over Ben's upbringing and potentially pursuing custody if their other tactics failed. "This is exactly what we need," Grace explained with satisfaction as she reviewed the unedited audio files. "They've essentially provided evidence of their own conspiracy to manipulate the legal system for personal gain." Ryan's investigation into Michael's background yielded even more damaging information that completely destroyed any remaining credibility he might have had in legal proceedings. His domestic violence history is more extensive than we initially realized, Ryan reported with professional thoroughness. 3 different women have filed restraining orders against him in the past 5 years, and there's a pattern of financial manipulation and emotional abuse that's been well documented. The final piece of evidence that sealed our victory came from an unexpected source when Janet Miller, apparently suffering from guilt about her role in the birthday party ambush, came forward with text messages and emails that exposed the full extent of the conspiracy against me. "I kept everything because I thought it was romantic that Michael was fighting so hard for his family," she admitted with embarrassment. "But after seeing how he really behaves, I realized I was helping someone who just wanted to hurt you and control Ben." Grace's presentation of our evidence to the family court judge was devastating in its completeness, documenting a pattern of harassment, manipulation, and attempted parental alienation that had escalated to illegal activity including unauthorized recording and perjury. "Your Honor, this isn't a case about grandparents' rights," she argued with legal precision. "This is a case about adults using a child as a weapon to punish a mother who refused to accept abuse." The judge's ruling was swift and comprehensive, dismissing my parents' petition with prejudice and awarding me an order of protection that prohibited them from contacting Ben or me for a minimum of 2 years. This court finds that the petitioners have demonstrated a pattern of behavior that is harmful to the child's well-being and contrary to his best interests, Judge Martinez declared with authority that felt like official validation of everything I had experienced. Michael's attempt to use the chaos of the grandparents' petition to launch his own custody challenge backfired spectacularly when the evidence of his domestic violence history and financial irresponsibility convinced the judge that supervised visitation was the maximum contact he should be allowed with Ben. The father's pattern of manipulative behavior and failure to meet his financial obligations demonstrates that increased custody would not serve the child's best interests, the court ruled with finality. The complete reversal of their campaign against me felt like emerging from a nightmare into sunlight, but the most satisfying moment came when Ben himself testified in chambers about his feelings regarding the various adults in his life. "I love my grandparents, but they were really mean to my mom," he told the judge with 8-year-old honesty that carried more weight than all the legal maneuvering in the world. The months following our legal victory marked the beginning of a profound healing journey that taught both Ben and me invaluable lessons about the difference between genuine family love and toxic control disguised as concern. Our weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Amanda Foster helped us process the trauma of betrayal by people we had trusted completely, while also building stronger communication skills that would protect us from future manipulation attempts. "The hardest part wasn't the threats or the legal battles," I explained to Dr. Foster during one of our sessions. "It was learning to trust my own judgment again after spending so many years being told that my perceptions were wrong and my boundaries were selfish." The recovery process involved rebuilding my sense of self-worth after decades of psychological conditioning that had taught me to prioritize other people's comfort over my own safety and my child's well-being. Ben's resilience amazed me as he worked through his own confusion about why adults who claimed to love him had created such chaos and pain in his life. "I understand that Grandpa and Grandma love me, but love isn't supposed to hurt people," he said with wisdom that seemed far beyond his 8 years. "Real love makes people feel safe and happy, not scared and sad like what happened at my birthday party." The process of rebuilding our social circle brought unexpected gifts as we connected with other families who had experienced similar dynamics of manipulation and control within their extended families. Grace introduced us to a support group for parents dealing with family court abuse, where I met other mothers who had faced campaigns designed to undermine their relationships with their children. "It's incredible how similar these patterns are across different families," shared Maria, another single mother in our support group. "The threats, the guilt trips, the attempts to turn children against their primary caregivers, it's like they all read from the same playbook." The validation of discovering that our experience wasn't unique helped normalize what we had endured while also providing practical strategies for maintaining healthy boundaries. Ryan became not just an ally but a genuine friend whose presence in our lives provided Ben with a positive male role model who demonstrated that masculinity could include protection, respect, and emotional intelligence rather than dominance and control. "Uncle Ryan shows me that men can be strong by helping people feel safe, not by making them scared," Ben observed after one of our weekend barbecues where Ryan taught him to throw a football. The relationship with Jennifer proved more complicated to navigate as she eventually reached out with what appeared to be genuine remorse for her role in the birthday party ambush and subsequent legal assault. "I was so caught up in Mom and Dad's version of reality that I lost sight of what was actually happening," she admitted during a carefully supervised coffee meeting 6 months after the court case concluded. Acknowledging the damage is the first step, our family therapist had counseled, but rebuilding trust requires consistent demonstration of changed behavior over time, not just apologies. Jennifer's journey toward redemption would need to involve genuine commitment to supporting healthy boundaries rather than simply feeling guilty about past choices. The most profound transformation occurred in my relationship with Ben as we learned to communicate openly about difficult topics without the fear of judgment or manipulation that had characterized our interactions with extended family members. "Mommy, can I ask you something without making you sad?" became his regular preface to conversations about complex emotions or confusing adult behavior. "You can always ask me anything, sweetheart," I would respond with the kind of emotional availability that had been impossible when I was constantly defending against family attacks. "Even if the topic makes me sad, I'm strong enough to handle difficult conversations because that's what people who love each other do, they talk about real things, even when it's hard." Our new tradition of birthday parties with chosen family became annual celebrations that included Grace, Ryan, Tommy, Dr. Foster, and other friends who had earned their place in our lives through consistent demonstration of genuine care and respect. "This feels like what family is supposed to feel like," Ben said during his 9th birthday party, surrounded by people who celebrated his joy without trying to control or manipulate the experience. The legal protections remained in place as my parents showed no genuine signs of understanding or remorse for their behavior, occasionally testing boundaries through indirect contact attempts that we documented but didn't engage with. "Some people never learn that love requires respect," I explained to Ben when he asked why we couldn't just forgive and forget like people suggested. Michael's supervised visits became increasingly sporadic as his true priorities became clear, confirming that his interest in Ben had always been more about controlling me than about genuine paternal devotion. "Real dads don't disappear when they can't get what they want from moms," Ben concluded with remarkable insight for someone so young. The financial stability that came with not being drained by legal battles and emotional chaos allowed us to create the kind of home environment where Ben could thrive academically and socially. His grades improved dramatically once the stress of family conflict was removed, and his teacher commented on his increased confidence and social skills. The most important lesson we learned, I reflected during our final session with Dr. Foster, is that family isn't defined by blood relations or legal obligations. Real family consists of people who consistently choose to love, protect, and support each other without conditions or ulterior motives. The wisdom felt hard-earned but absolutely invaluable as we moved forward in our lives. As Ben and I sat together on his 10th birthday, looking at photos from our journey through crisis to healing, he made an observation that captured everything we had learned about the difference between toxic control and genuine love. "You know what, Mom? The people who really love us don't need to threaten us or make us feel bad to get us to spend time with them. They just love us and trust that we'll love them back because that's how real families work." The peace in our home now feels like the most precious gift we could have given each other, the safety to be authentic, to set boundaries, to choose our relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or fear. Sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones you need protection from, but when you find your real family, the ones who choose to love and support you unconditionally, that's when you truly understand what home means. Our story isn't about perfect endings, but about the courage to choose healing over dysfunction and authentic love over toxic control. If you've experienced similar family dynamics or struggled with setting boundaries with manipulative relatives, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. How did you recognize the difference between genuine concern and controlling behavior? What strategies helped you protect your children while maintaining your own emotional health? Please hit that like button if this story resonated with you. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family dysfunction and building healthy relationships. Share this video with anyone who might benefit from hearing that they're not alone in facing these challenges. Sometimes knowing that others have walked this path and found peace on the other side can make all the difference. Thank you for listening to our story, and remember that choosing to protect your peace and your children's well-being isn't selfish, it's the most loving thing you can do. Wishing you all the strength to trust your instincts and the courage to build the family you deserve.